Just like different foods that we eat affect our bodies and how we feel, different power sources affect the circuits within our guitar pedals. And I've been really fascinated with this. And over the last 10 years, as I've traveled all over the world, I've collected hundreds of 9-volt batteries to study their composition and makeup. I just recently finished these studies, and I'm super excited to announce and introduce to you the JHS Bat Sim. Not all batteries are created equal, and if we look back through the history and invention of batteries, we can see the different techniques, the compositions and structures, which ultimately lead to all the variations you're going to hear today. We first see the term battery in 1749 when Benjamin Franklin was experimenting with a set of linked capacitors. In 1780, Luigi Galvani discovered a new form of capturing electricity and using it when doing experiments, taking dissected frog legs, shocking them, and seeing how they react. These findings led physicist Alessandro Volta in 1800 to develop the first modern battery as we know it, and the term volt itself comes from his namesake. Moving into a more modern age, we have Thomas Edison, who's most known for his work with the filament and light bulb, which was an adjacent possible to the vacuum tube that Lee DeForest later invented. He worked out a nickel iron type storage device, and this is called the Edison battery. And probably the most interesting discovery in the history of batteries happened in 1938 when the director of the Baghdad Museum discovered this battery type artifact that they believe was used for some early form of electronic or electrotherapy. And this shows us that batteries, quite honestly, have probably dated back to 250 BC. So jumping into the Bat Sim and its controls, I'll just go over them briefly. At the very heart of it is the voltage control, which, as you know, we just released the Volture, which has been really successful, and it's been cool to see people using this, tagging us on Instagram and other YouTube videos. So that's all this is, except this is a little more sophisticated in the fact that at noon it is 9 volts. If you swing it down, it's 0, and if you go up, it's 24. So this only takes away, but this can actually boost and lower voltage. And this is something that you see, especially in older batteries as they age. There can be weird chemical reactions where 9 volts actually grows inside before the battery decomposes. Next up is the capacity control. Now this is something that a lot of people don't realize with simple devices that just drain voltage. There is this totally other reaction within a battery, and it's really sophisticated and nuanced. So this moves the voltage, but this moves the capacitance. And what that means in layman's terms is, as a battery dies, it goes from 9 volts down. But it's the speed of which the current is dissipating inside the battery that actually has some of the biggest sonic effect. So at noon, it's neutral. 9 volts capacity is neutral and normal. If you go here, it's a really slow capacitance discharge, and if you turn it up, it's incredibly fast. And these two controls alone are almost endless in the pursuit of a perfect tone from your pedal. The third control is age, and this is really simple. Old batteries are made different. Batteries over time dissolve, degrade, and they deconstruct internally and even externally. If we look at these 3 vintage batteries, which I'll go over in a second, they actually look different because they are in different situations, humidities, and weathers. This is like really minty. This one's kind of expanding here. The acid's about to break out, and this one is totally roasted. They all 3 work, but the age of the battery has a lot to do with how the capacitance inside discharges, how the voltage drains, the speeds of the currents, the whole deal. Really important control, and you can vary that from brand new to old. Before I go over the 4th control, which is the rotary, which chooses the different battery replications, I'm just gonna go over the jacks and power and such because those are very important. You have true bypass, you have an LED, you have 9 volt power, so don't put anything 18, 24 in this because remember, this control at noon is 9, and then it will cut or boost that. And then you have in and out. This is really simple. This is your chain. So guitar in here, or whatever pedal you want before in, and then out to your amp or your next pedal. Then you have a send return, and this is what makes this device unique, and quite frankly, what makes it work perfectly and replicate these devices in such a unique way, is that you come out of the send and you just go into any pedal you want. I'm gonna use a germanium fuzz face because this is classic. It's talked about. The battery thing with a fuzz is really audible. So you're gonna go send into your pedal that you choose, and you're gonna go return into the out of that pedal. It's gonna put it inside of this loop. And that's gonna take the circuit and everything about that pedal and integrate it into this device, the Bat Sim. So all of these controls are gonna be fully integrated and give you the ability to absolutely perfectly replicate all 10 of these amazing batteries. The very first mode I'm gonna start with just happens to be mode 1, and it is an R. And this R stands for Radioshack, but the genre of battery is important, and it is really just a vintage 70s style battery. These are slightly smaller. They're actually, it's really interesting. I have some old Vox plug-in effects, and you can only fit the smaller 9 volts in there. And this changes the composition and the makeup of the battery in an interesting way. But I have these 3 examples that I showed you earlier. I have this ever-ready kind of energizer thing. This is a Computron dry battery for transistor radios. And then my favorite, it actually broke, but we were able to just kind of put a connector in there and do all of our tests and use the study of it. It's an old Radioshack battery that looks like it's been through a nuclear war, but it performs amazing. So Radioshack's a big deal. They started in 1921 and at their peak had over 8,000 stores. And they just represent this era of like batteries are used in everything. Radios, devices, instruments, pedals. Like, it was a batteried world at this time, and that's really cool. So I like this one because of what it does to the mid frequencies. I think it's really important with guitar especially to make sure the mid's set in a perfect place. But in this case, you can impose some of that frequency change just using this Radioshack battery. So let's put the fuzz face in here and demonstrate it. Next up, I'm gonna skip a few spots, maybe come back to them. I'm gonna do the Kodak. This is mode 1, 2, 3, 4. So Kodak mode, it's under the JHS mode. And this is a cool one historically because Duracell, that we all know, got its start in 1965 because Kodak needed a battery, like a portable device to power the really power-hungry Instamatic camera and flash. And so Kodak actually commissioned the first and biggest commercial battery that we know. And there are different versions of batteries within the camera industry that are really fascinating because cameras, film or digital, they need a lot of current, they need a lot of power, and they need to last a long time. And this has been done differently over the decades, but my absolute favorite is this red label Kodak. It's a super heavy duty zinc 9 volt. And the characteristic on this is like nothing else. You see a different blue label Kodak. These are really, really different. This is a super alkaline and this is heavy duty zinc. And you're just gonna notice a wildly different low mid. It's hard to explain and you'll just have to hear it. You also see things like Fujifilm. They had their own Japanese made kind of camera batteries. You have this AGF photo type thing as well. And then Sony had the Stamina Platinum. This was for like early digitals. This is an NOS for early digital cameras, which are now kind of prehistoric. But it's cool that the photo industry has such a play in making a characteristic battery that's just so different from all the other ones. So let's jump in and listen and focus in on the low mids. It's really apparent, especially when the big chords and like 2 notes and any dissonance you might hear. On this next demo mode, and a few of these I'm not going to demonstrate, but it is worth noting. I'll let the other YouTubers out there demo these modes. This is the bunny, which represents Duracell. You might think of Energizer Bunny, but actually it's originally Duracell, and especially with foreign variants, this is a Turkish variant and a Thai variant, and this replicates this mode, which has a really cool high end. So let's move on past that to one that I'm actually going to demonstrate. Next up, we're going to go to this B, and this represents Boss. Now, Boss is the most epic pedal company in existence, and when they introduced their first pedal line in 1977, the color code pedal line that we all know of, these came in these original boxes, and it's important to note they have a cutout right here. So when you open these up, you have something like an OD1, you had the SP1, and you had the PH1, and these are the first three of these. The batteries within these are incredible. They changed the composition when they went away from silver screw. That refers to this literal screw on the pedal, and we see that change, and it goes from this. This is the 77 silver screw battery. It's a light orange. When we go to black screw, it's a darker orange. This one's heavily damaged and there's acid coming out of it, so don't want to touch that. And then we see things like the Black Boss battery later in the 90s, and I don't like it at all. So this is a simulation of this, and it has an incredible low end characteristic that I really love. It's like this roll off. It's exactly what you want your guitar to sound like in a mastered scenario. Next, I'm gonna go all the way to that last mode, which is mode number 10, and it shows a USB symbol. Now this one is weird. I struggled with it. I struggled figuring it out. It's strange. It's nothing like these other vintage style batteries because it actually involves circuitry inside of it, different ports. So this is literally a battery that was taken apart and studied. This particular brand, it's a Chinese manufacturer. You plug in a USB cable and you charge it. It's just really, really bizarre. So what happens is because of the space you need for the circuit board, the mount of the jack, and just the rechargeable structure, you have a smaller cell. If you look at something like a Duracell or whatever, it's completely cell. This is kind of constricted internally, and it has a minimal structure, and the sound is just strange. I feel like it's almost a mid scoop. It's a bad sound, but in a good way, meaning sometimes you need to take a pedal you're familiar with and change it up a bit, and this is almost like the experimental way to do that. These are sold all over the place. They're just weird, and let's demo it. We're gonna go down one mode underneath the USB, and you have kanji, and this kanji just says 9, so 9 volts. What this represents is a branch or just a bucket of batteries that I would classify as manufactured in Japan to specific Japanese manufacturing specifications. They do some things differently because of import-export laws, and they have different kind of safety laws there. So there's a big mix of things. We have a lot of generic stuff, but we have like Panasonic. You have a rebrand National Panasonic. Lots of Panasonics, honestly. These fully branded ones. I bought several of these at a gas station or like a service station last time we were there. And these were really fun to look at because they're just wildly different than anything we have here. Japan's cool. Got all these different structures. And the thing about whatever's happening with the composition of these due to the restrictions on the manufacturing, it results in quite simply a totally flat response. It would be like saying, this is what a perfect functional battery with 0 issues or 0 variance or tolerances sounds like. Because it is so straightforward and predictable, we're gonna pass by demoing this and move on to the next. Next up, we're gonna go to the EH icon, which represents electroharmonics, but this category or icon has more of a broad stroke to it, and it is pedal manufactured batteries. So we saw Boss, but Boss is different because they have the Japanese restrictions on their recipe for pedals. And this is interesting because you kind of have this scenario where a lot of the same manufacturers or private labels make batteries for pedal companies. And we see a lot of pedal company branded batteries. We see the Dan Electro, we see like the Black Label TC is an amazing battery. Exotic Effects, this is a battery that they shipped exclusively in their really famous wah pedal. And then we see things like the Mike Matthews Electro-Harmonix battery that I feel like everyone knows or should know about because it has Mike in his power pose. But out of all of these, the most interesting one to me is the vintage Black Label Electro-Harmonix battery. This battery's killer. I love it in a DS1. It's just an amazing battery because it feels like it's crumbling, like the sustain, the feel of the note coming out. There's a decay that's different because of the capacitance and the resistance on the output of the terminals, and it's really cool. So let's demonstrate this on the fuzz face, and you're just gonna hear the fuzz face like you've heard it, but I need you to pay attention to the note decay because that's where this is really audible. We're gonna scoot over next to the EH. You see the R, which stands for Roland. And this is a cool battery because I have a ton of new old stock, never used Roland batteries from the 90s. And I love it says heavy duty for musical instruments. Boss had their own battery and it was made in a battery manufacturing plant in Hamamatsu where Boss is located. But the Roland batteries, if you look closely, it says made in Taiwan. So these do not have the restrictions of the Japanese battery, but they have the recipe and composition that Boss used just from a different manufacturing standpoint. And it is something to note that these are intended for drum machines and electronic devices that Roland made to go along with their synthesizers and keyboards. They have a lot more longevity and the capacitance reaction, this knob that we talked about, how it drains fast or slow. This is a really slow draining but powerful battery. We need to move on because this video doesn't need to be 30 minutes. So I'm going to skip over this one and jump into the last two. Almost last, second to last, is this eagle kind of thing. It represents USA made, USA branded batteries. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens in batteries for stores within the USA. Much like the Japanese ones, they're all branded in a certain way, but they're kind of made in one of two factories. This happens with US relationship, and a lot of these batteries are just made in China, and they're kind of branded all over the American stores, and they have a really cool sound. But let me show you a few of my favorites. I mean, things as simple as the Target battery are really cool. Best Buy, these are identical by the way, just different branding. True Value, CVS is a super cool battery. This just has a little more of the capacitance discharge than the others. We have CVS. Walgreens has their own. Ironically, these are the same exact battery, just branded as two different pharmacies. There's a lesson in that. Casey's gas station, the greatest gas station of the Midwest. And then you get into stuff like Toys R Us and Kroger. Amazon Basics is ironically the identical CVS Max Alkaline, just branded different. My personal two favorites though, and I had to pick between these because there's a little bit of nostalgia and they sound the best to me. There is the Winn-Dixie battery. I grew up shopping at a Winn-Dixie with my parents. It's a Southern thing. But my favorite is absolutely the Ace Alkaline. This is Ace hardware. The saying is Ace is the place for the friendly hardware tone.
Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folks.
I don't know the saying, but this is it. Ace Alkaline is the representation of the greatest, in my opinion, American battery. So let's give it a listen. The last mode I want to demonstrate, and frankly the most exciting, is you go over to the JHS mode and it simulates this one unique battery. And the story of this battery is really cool because it comes out of one of John Mayer's pedals that I got and serviced. And John had wrapped it just to keep it away from the circuit board. But when I began these studies, I realized something. I could actually capture and understand the dissipation, that this battery had gone through due to the way that John picks and plays his guitar. The guitar itself actually creates current or voltage when you pick and strum it because the pickups are simply magnetic coils. It is magnetic poles wrapped with wire creating a field of electricity, and when you strum it there is a current voltage. Now this reacts with the circuit due to input, ground, power rail, and all of that stuff in particular pedals, and we were able to calculate and predict how this had reacted and how it would further react due to how he played guitar through the circuit. I know it sounds really complicated, but in a weird way, we can't capture an amazing guitarist's fingers and tone and whatever buzzwords you want to talk about, but we can actually look into this battery and replicate how he had approached the circuit through his playing and get some of those nuances. So I'm going to jam on it and you're going to notice that it reacts much differently. Remember back to the battery when I said, hey, it has this strange decay or fall off. Well, this one has an opposite thing because of how nuanced John is, and a lot of times he doesn't use a pick. This all plays into the chemistry that's now in this very unique battery and offered to you in the JHS mode. To wrap this up, I would love for you to grab some headphones if you're not already, and we're gonna play the jams back to back so that you can hear the differences. A lot of times in our brains, we can't really distinguish differences when they're separated by talking or things like that. And that's why it's important to line these up, really focus, again, in headphones, because the nuances on the low and high end are extreme when you have isolated hearing. So we're gonna go through all the jams, listen to them, and in the comments below, just drop your favorite. One of the most exciting things about the Bat Sim to me is how it links back to the very first guitar pedal, the Maestro Fuzz Tone of 1962, and the fact that in the promo audio demo that was on a vinyl record, it describes the first pedal and it's talking about it now has a foot switch, it has volume and attack controls, and it has one statement that I love. It says self-contained power source. And this is a very first for something like this. Before this, you had to plug in the old DeArmond tremolo or tape echoes, and this very first pedal was made possible by the battery. But now the Bat Sim brings voltage diversity to your pedal board. Wrapping this up, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. This has been a really, really fun process for me, an experiment. We put so much resource into this with our engineering here at JHS, collecting all these batteries at all these quirky places and people thinking I'm nuts with a drawer full of them. But now we have something really cool and unique that quite frankly is able to change up any pedal. I think for a player like me, a lot of you may be similar. I use a lot of the same pedals. I use the same old tricks. I'm comfortable with them. But this allows you to put your favorite drive pedals or whatever into this loop and kind of find a fresh space with something that you really love as a player. So I'm excited for you to get your hands on them. These are going to be really affordable for you. They're $99 and you click the link in the description below. These are exclusive from our JHS website. Go check it out, grab one, place your order today. And don't forget, in the comments, let me know your favorite battery sound that you heard today and what you heard. I'm really excited for that feedback, and I'm already thinking about a V2.